I don't work here anymore. Hey, boss, got an opening. Worked for a medical transportation company that had a contract with Medicaid. One of their many rules was that you could not provide any assistance to the patient inside of their house. One elderly lady had an old house with a very small foyer that you had to climb 3 steps to get to the main floor. The only other entrance was around back and up 2.5 flights of rickety steps to an old deck that opened into a bedroom. Upstairs. She's in a wheelchair. Common sense says take her in the front door, up 3 stairs and she's home on the level she lives on. Medicaid says take her up the outside stairs, dump her in the bedroom upstairs and let her worry about getting down to the living room level. We ignored their policy and took her in the front door anyway. A random inspection by a random inspector showed that we were not in compliance. We appealed. The inspector came out and saw the different options and decided that we had no case for appeal. Take her up the outside stairs. Nope. From then on, when the driver arrived at her house, he would get her out of the van in the sidewalk, and then get on the radio and tell the boss to shove his stupid job. Now that he was no longer an employee, he was free to assist this lovely person into her front door and up the stairs. Once finished, they would come back to the van, tell the boss they'd reconsidered, and ask for their job back. Boss was always understanding and took them back, but very carefully noted the 10 to 15 minute break in their employment, to show that the company remained in compliance. Aftermath, we had contests to see who could have the most dramatic I quit scene. Medicaid noted our activities, but couldn't put a handle on how to stop it. Malicious compliance achieved.
Now to the comments. From a patient, thank you. This is using malicious compliance for good. 4 years ago my gallbladder went bad, but due to not having sufficient medical coverage I didn't get it looked at soon enough and developed sepsis. From there everything seemed to happen very, very quickly, and I found myself in a coma, suffering massive organ failure as sepsis destroyed my liver and kidneys. Now for the last 4 years I've been working on rebuilding what little semblance of life I can, doing dialysis every other day, which leaves me, a former personal trainer and power lifter, weak as a child and confined to a wheelchair. If it weren't for one of my personal heroes, Ishmael, I would be left at the step of my home in Arizona, where it's usually 100+ degrees when I come home from treatment. It breaks his transport company's rules, but he always helps me up that step and into my house so that I can do the only thing I can do, and pass out of my bed for a few hours. This is keeping me alive, but at the cost of almost keeping me dead. In the last 4 years I've suffered being left by a woman who couldn't accept, after 6 years of marriage, my new situation, the loss of my job and career and autonomy, the loss of my dignity, as I throw up almost all solid food I eat, and I'm often too weak to make it to the bathroom. Being end stage, the only thing I can really do is hope that a liver and kidney become available on the transplant list, but until then it's the kindness of people like this, that is often all I have left in this fudge state between medical technology being good enough to keep us alive, and medical technology being able to give us back a sense of quality of life. Thank you. A million times thank you.
Everyone who reads this, please consider becoming an organ donor. It won't have any effect on you or your family once you're gone, but it can save the life of another person.
Thank you. To so many souls, it's much, much more than a checkbox at the DMV. God, I hate stupid rules like that. So idiotic. And what an ass of an inspector. At least your boss understood and played along with the malicious compliance.
Most people seem to become inspectors because they're so intent on following the letter of the law and not the spirit. Source: have dealt with home city building inspectors. Edit: should clarify, I meant city building inspectors, the ones that give permits to buildings, and not the ones you contract with to look over homes for problems. My mistake.
I have a question. Are home inspectors supposed to inspect the crawl space for problems? Are they supposed to know things like broken vent screens, earth-to-wood contact, and such? As a pest control technician, it was pretty regular that they would move in, need my services maybe 3 months down the line, I'd end up in the crawl space, and find problems specific to my discipline that aren't hard to catch and really ought to be caught by home inspectors, but maybe they don't check for that, and if a buyer wants to know about those kinds of potential problems, they need to order a WDO report. You should have enacted Gone with the Wind last scene. Boss, what's going to happen to me? Employee, frankly, my dear, I don't give a dang.
I like it. Expand on that. Recreate famous quitting scenes from movies while making a video of each. Upload to a YouTube channel, bolt on a Patreon account, and that's how you get paid for the missing time while also being a good human being.
Pointing at everyone, duck you, duck you, duck you, pointing at the old lady, you're cool, back to co-workers, duck you. Wonderful. Please do add some of those quit scenes.
I'd love to see those.
Seconded. Very wholesome. I hope you were still paid for those 15 minutes you quit for. I mean, your boss knew you were still working?
OP replied. He was a very generous employer, but that remained, as it must, unpaid time. I can tell you that nobody suffered or objected to it. It was a true group effort.
Paperwork on his end. 10 minutes donation of time on your end. Simply a group coming together to do what's right despite the obstacles. /r/humans being brothers.
In the best way.
Sounds like you're a group of fantastic employees. My not so wholesome brain jumps to a scenario where the employer has a poor employee who normally works a different route and moves him to the I quit client for a day. An easy way to lose a bad employee. I'm not from the US and it's more difficult to fire employees without later losing a lawsuit than the stories I've read from US Redditors.
Nat, that poor employee would probably decide to take the high road this time and follow instructions. Putting her on the second floor.
Aftermath. We had contests to see who could have the most dramatic I quit scene. You know what, boss? I suddenly came down with a severe case of anal glaucoma. Anal glaucoma? Yeah, it's when I just can't see my ass working for you anymore. I get that no one was doing this from anywhere but a compassionate place, but you see, the transport company basically tricked you into accepting liability for any random injuries to you or the patient, right? Wrench your back slipping on some random crap. Tough shit, chump. If you're looking to loophole, it seems like a way that doesn't set up the employee is just officially complete the transport and leave her in her own foyer for a moment while you go back to the van and radio the transport is over. Then once you are off Medicaid's dime, do a completely unrelated courtesy check on the lady to check for service, scheduling stuff, and since it's a completely unbilled time for the company, offer any sort of minor assistance that might be needed. Just saying. A random inspection by a random inspector showed that we were not in compliance. What the hell was that person's problem? They could have easily just let it pass and nod at you for doing a good job. That person is the type that's the reason we can't have nice things. Like, quite literally the only reason for them to actually report that incompliance in the first place was to be an asshole.
TBH, I'd report it too, because then the next inspector could duck me over and say I didn't report it.
I mean, he cannot prove that when you inspected, they were not in compliance. Compliant to the rules, but the kindness outweighs any malicious intent. Still deserves an upvote.
I think the maliciousness is directed at Medicaid and the inspector who cited the violation in the first place. I enjoyed this one.
We had contests to see who could have the most dramatic I quit scene. Could you tell us some of the winners? Please. As someone who is bedridden and uses a wheelchair to get around, you are the reason people like me ever get to leave our bedrooms, so, thank you from the bottom of my heart.